Mara Bell learned very early that fear does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it came quietly, like the pause between breaths, or the moment when a room felt slightly different even though nothing had changed. Ridgeway was supposed to be a fresh start, a town where the noise of her old life would finally fade into something manageable. It was small, almost forgotten by the larger world, a place where people believed bad things only happened elsewhere. That belief was part of what made it dangerous. The apartment was modest, a second-floor unit with beige walls and windows that faced a narrow alley lined with aging trees. On her first night there, Mara lay awake listening to the unfamiliar stillness. No traffic, no sirens, just the soft hum of electricity in the walls. She told herself this was what peace sounded like. She told herself she would get used to it. The first sound came 3 nights later. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, pacing back and forth beneath her window. She waited, holding her breath, counting the seconds between each step. When the sound stopped, she told herself it was nothing. Someone walking a dog, someone passing through. The explanation mattered less than the relief she felt when silence returned. But the footsteps came back, always late, always unhurried, never close enough to see, never loud enough to prove. Fear without proof had a way of making a person doubt themselves, and Mara was no exception. She began to question her own senses, wondering if anxiety was filling in gaps that reality had left empty. When she finally called the police, she rehearsed her words beforehand. She wanted to sound calm, reasonable, not dramatic. She described the sounds, the timing, the feeling that lingered long after the footsteps faded. The voice on the other end listened politely, then offered explanations that felt rehearsed. Animals, neighbors, coincidence. The report was noted, she was told, and that should have been reassuring. It wasn't. Days passed, then weeks. The footsteps became part of her routine, as predictable as the sunset. She adjusted her life around them, showering earlier, sleeping with lights on, keeping the television playing softly through the night. She started writing things down, not because she believed it would change anything, but because it made her feel less alone. Dates, times, small details. The act of recording gave the fear shape. One morning, as she locked her door on the way to work, she noticed a faint mark on the frame. It looked like nothing at first glance, just a shallow scratch, easily overlooked. But Mara knew it hadn't been there before. She touched it lightly, a chill running through her fingers. She took a photo with her phone and carried it with her all day, like a secret she didn't want to reveal. At the police station, the officer barely glanced at the image. He told her it could have been old damage, that buildings collected marks the way people collected scars. Mara tried to explain, tried to insist that something was wrong, but she could feel the conversation closing around her. When she left, the photo was still on her phone, the concern still in her chest, and nothing had changed. What frightened her most wasn't the dismissal. It was how easy it was to accept it. How quickly she found herself wondering if she really was overreacting. Fear had a way of shrinking when it was denied by others, even as it grew stronger inside her. The window was open the night she realized she could no longer pretend. Just an inch or two, enough to let in cold air and the smell of damp earth from below. She was certain she had locked it, certain in the way you are about things you've checked twice. She stood there for a long time, staring at the gap, waiting for her heart to slow. It didn't. She called the police again. This time the call went unanswered. Across town, another woman was making a similar call. Leah Porter lived alone in a ground-floor apartment near the edge of Ridgeway. She worked late shifts and slept during the day, her life out of sync with most of the town. She had been hearing footsteps too, slow and patient, always outside, always just beyond reach. She described them to an officer weeks earlier and was told it was probably nothing. The report was filed under disturbance, then forgotten. Neither woman knew about the other. The system that held their words did not connect them. It treated each fear as an isolated event, a single voice instead of a pattern. Mara stopped inviting friends over. She stopped talking about what was happening because every explanation ended the same way, with well-meaning reassurances that made her feel foolish for being afraid. She smiled more. She laughed at the right moments. Inside, she felt like she was slowly erasing herself to fit into other people's comfort. Sleep became shallow and fragmented. She dreamed of footsteps echoing through empty hallways, of doors that wouldn't close, of voices calling her name without sound. She woke each morning exhausted, her body tense as if it had been bracing for something all night long. The final visit to the police station was different. She didn't bring photos or notes. She didn't rehearse her words. She simply stood at the counter and spoke the truth as plainly as she could. She told them she was afraid. She told them she felt like something was closing in. She told them she needed someone to listen. The officer smiled in a way that was meant to be comforting. He told her Ridgway was safe. He told her she was worrying too much. He told her nothing bad was going to happen. Mara nodded because there was nothing else to do. As she turned to leave, she said one last thing, quietly, almost to herself. "If something happens to me, please remember I came here." The words felt heavy in her mouth, like a confession she didn't want to make. 3 nights later, her phone rang unanswered on her kitchen counter. Her alarm went off the next morning and was silenced without her ever waking. By the time anyone noticed she was missing, the story had already changed. It was no longer about fear or imagination. It was about loss. Ridgway woke up slowly to the realization that something terrible had happened in its quiet streets. Police reports were pulled from files. Calls were replayed. The notes Mara had taken in her careful handwriting were found in her apartment, lined up neatly on the kitchen table as if she had wanted someone to see them. Leah watched the news from her couch, her hands trembling as she recognized details that mirrored her own experiences, the nights, the sounds, the way no one had taken it seriously. She went to the police station the same day, her old report clutched tightly in her hand. For the first time, the officer listened all the way through. The investigation that followed was thorough in a way the warnings had not been. Patterns emerged quickly once someone bothered to look. A person of interest surfaced, someone who had been questioned once and dismissed due to lack of evidence. Someone who had been present, unnoticed, while fear quietly accumulated around them. The town changed after that. Doors locked more often, porch lights stayed on. People spoke in lower voices. There was a collective regret that hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. The police issued statements, apologies were made, promises followed. But apologies did not answer unanswered calls. They did not quiet the footsteps that still echoed in memory. They did not bring back the sense of safety that had been taken for granted. Leah moved away within months. Ridgway returned to its routines, though something essential had shifted. The belief that nothing ever happened there was gone, replaced by an understanding that silence did not mean safety. Mara's story lingered, passed from one person to another, changing slightly each time, but always carrying the same message beneath it. That fear should not be dismissed simply because it is inconvenient. That listening matters. That patterns only exist if someone is willing to see them. Some cases are not ignored because they are invisible. They are ignored because they are quiet, because they arrive without spectacle, because they ask for attention before tragedy forces it. And by the time the silence is broken, it is often already too late.